I supposed to start this?
Yeah, I think that's the routine, isn't it? You're going to start us off and I end it?
Oh, okay. I mean, it was one time, so the routine could be whatever we want.
Yeah. Hey guys, it's second episode. We're still new at this. So
hi, welcome back to Fantasy for the Ages. If you didn't know that's what this was, you're probably in the wrong place. But welcome to those of you who do know what this is. A podcast where me and my dad sit down and talk about fantasy series, starting with Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time.
And you are?
I'm Zach Scriven, son.
That makes me Jim Scriven, and I'm the father. And yeah, it's great to have you back. Now, of course, as we're saying that, we're assuming anyone is listening.
Nope, don't hear anybody. So,
you know, I was happy to note that, yes, some people did listen to our first episode. So, I mean, we had a good little crowd, people all over listening to it. No one let us know that it sucked.
which, I mean, is an accomplishment in and of itself.
Yeah. Now, there is one exception.
Uh-oh.
Your sister. She listened to half of it, disagreed with my comments on the inheritance cycle.
Nope.
No, on Percy Jackson.
Yep.
And she was out. That's it.
On the bright side, when you then brought it up later for dinner, I got to confirm that she did not have a problem with anything I said, so I'm in the clear.
Oh, so siblings stick together, but dad can be the bad guy. All right.
For once, apparently. Yeah.
But it was great that she listened. Mm-hmm. It's also been a lot of fun jumping into social media to connect with people. You know, we've got presence out there in Twitter and Facebook and Instagram for this podcast. You know, I spent some time this week connecting with others who care about the things we talk about, especially right now, people who are passionate about
Wheel of Time.
But also, you know, some connecting with people in some other series like Stormlight Archives, actually Star Trek. I mean, there was just some crossovers on things, and it was nice. One of the ones that I connected with were the folks over at Talk Around Riyadh, who, you know, we had mentioned badly in our first episode as I mangled naming the podcast. We got it right in the end.
You got there.
Anyways, it was really nice to connect, and they said they'd give us a listen. Hopefully they'll hear this episode, but if we were bad enough in the first one, nobody may listen to anymore.
But that's okay, because while we'd love to do this for all of you, whoever you may be, we're doing it for ourselves.
We are. We definitely enjoy this. Before we jump into stuff, because we got some good stuff to talk about today, just, hey, how are you?
You know, I'm doing pretty well. It's been a good week time since we last sat down and record. I had a couple fun developments. I got one of my D&D crowd to give Wheel of Time a try. Jury's still out on how he'll receive it, but there's hope.
I also tried to get someone to read Wheel of Time. Since we talked last, I did talk to your mother again to see, and no, still not a chance. Not at this time, at least. But she might listen to the podcast.
It's going to make no sense to her if she doesn't read the book, but that's fine.
Maybe we'll nudge her into it that way.
Good luck.
Or at least she'll be ready for the show on Amazon whenever it does come out. We don't know still, but hopefully somewhere in 2021. We're almost to 2021 now, but hopefully sometime it'll come out. That would be awesome. I also had a fine week. You know, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. We talked about that lightly last episode, and you said hopefully we will never have to talk about it again. But
apparently
sorry,
we just did.
Just did it again, yeah. For those of you who don't know necessarily, Zach and I actually do record this right now sitting in the same room together. He's still a resident of my domicile, which is great because we've been able to be in the same pandemic bubble and can see each other all the time, which is great.
Yeah, I wasn't here pre-pandemic for a while. I was off at university, but since I've just been back, and it's nice to be with family, especially at a time like now.
It was good to clarify. You had been off at university. You aren't just a freeloader living off your parents. He has plans. He does. Good stuff.
Maybe.
And hopefully our listeners will eventually hear about those plans over time as this podcast goes on for years and years. Who knows?
As things develop, hopefully.
All right. Well, what we are going to do now, this episode, is jump into material truly about the Wheel of Time. It is, as we mentioned last episode, 15 books, and some short stories, too, that are part of that. that we're going to spend a significant chunk of time here at the beginning of our podcast really exploring. It's my favorite series right now, and I know you do like it as well.
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to say that I think it's the best because there's so much I have not read. Mm-hmm. But I would say it is my current favorite and the best that I think I have read so far.
Okay. It made sense for us to start with it, in part because we do both enjoy it. We have both read the whole series, and there's a lot of buzz about it right now since Amazon is putting that TV show together. So we'll just kind of say, hey, good starting point.
We'd love to jump on that bandwagon.
Why not? Absolutely. So, I'm going to assume, as we start talking about Wheel of Time, that many of our listeners will have already read and enjoyed the series. Probably not all. So again, we'll definitely put it out here. This is a spoilers-style podcast. We're going to talk about things that you would learn by reading these books. So for those of you who've already read them, there'll be things that you're connecting with. Maybe we'll suggest ideas and thoughts on it you hadn't thought of before. Certainly, I read through many of these books multiple times, and every time I read through them, I got new insights, new connections that I certainly didn't have a whiff of the first time through. If you are just now starting the series, just read fast. But at the same time, we're not going to try to massively spoil. Like, we are not going to tell you in this episode how it ends.
No, but I do believe we are going to give some context in this episode for the series that you don't learn immediately. It's information that you really get exposed to slowly over time. So if you're just starting, just like you were in reading the prologue, you're probably going to be a little bit lost in this episode.
It goes back to my experience when I read it the first time. It was very confusing to read that prologue. There was so much context that I didn't have the first time I read it, that when I went back and read Eye of the World a second time, I enjoyed it much more because I understood some basic fundamentals now that I was lost on the first time. So I kind of hope what we're going to do today and probably the next couple of episodes is just give enough of that background, some of the premise of what's going on here, where is this series coming from, so that somebody reading it might enjoy it a little better.
And conversely, I volunteer to be the voice of ignorance, because some of this I've figured out, I've heard other people talk about, I've read online, I've read through the series, but some of it I imagine I will not understand myself, and I'll need some help.
So I thought a good question for us to start, just kind of figure out, how do we describe this series to somebody who's never heard of it to start with? What's your elevator pitch? What is the Wheel of Time?
I think I saw recently a tweet that basically summed up what I would say is one of the best elevator pitches for someone who likes fantasy at all, initially. And that's, right, so Tolkien? That's nice. Now imagine it, but with more compelling and realistic, powerful female characters. And so that's kind of just the starting point. You introduce that it's a balanced cast of powerful men and women, and if that doesn't pique any interest, I'm confused.
Man, I don't know if you said just that little bit, if that would be enough to really capture it, but...
It definitely doesn't capture the soul of Wheel of Time, but I think that's one of the best selling points of trying to get people. And I did give, because I said I had got a friend to finally pick it up and start it, and I didn't even emphasize that part. I just repeated over and over, this is what I consider the best series I have read so far. You need to read this. Mm-hmm. If you ever want to know where I steal D&D ideas from, it's here. This is where you go. And, I mean, it worked after a number of months.
Yeah. See, I'd say Wheel of Time series is the story of, primarily at its core, some young people who get drawn into a massive, overarching battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. The forces of evil want to completely upturn and destroy the world. The forces of good, they have a different plan. And these people, these young people, are fundamental, integral parts of that plan, and they have no bloomin' idea to start. And throughout the series, they grow into their roles. And obviously there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on around them. but the world really rotates around these core characters and the various paths they end up going, the tapestry they weave.
So I like that on the one hand. On the other hand, I might fundamentally disagree with the entire premise of this actually being a battle between good and evil. But that's a little bit of a hot take for you.
Maybe we'll explore that eventually.
Yeah, we'll get there. Oh, goodness. The easy duh answer would be, if you're looking for a singular titular character, it's Rand.
Rand al'Thor.
Is he the most important character from a technical aspect? Probably. Is he the character that you always spend the most time with? Stats actually, I think, would support that that's not true.
Yeah, there are big chunks of time you don't even see him. He's not on screen. Book 2, The Great Hunt, most of it... No, not Book 2, it's Book 3. Most of it, you don't see him at all. Just little snippets here and there, and then at the end.
It's literally a book named after him, and he's barely in it. There's another one later on, I think it's Crossroads at Twilight. I'm not sure he's in that book at all.
Yeah. But still, yeah, I'd say he's the main character. But that's the funny thing about this. There's a lot of main characters.
Yes, there's a lot of named characters.
Oh,
over
my goodness.
2,000, I'm pretty sure.
There are so many named characters. Some of which, you maybe see once. All right. Well, I didn't want to go deep into who the main character was. I just figured, let's throw that out first. Let's get that on the table. What I want to really go into this episode is, again, setting the context for the Wheel of Time series. Because there's a lot that takes place in the world that Robert Jordan created before you get to the main start of the first book, The Eye of the World.
It's almost like you could write a whole book about the world of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time.
You could! Which is sitting on the table right in front of me. The world of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time. A lot of people call this the White Book. And I bought it back when it first came out.
Therefore, you can explain which came out first, the end of the series or this book?
Oh, no, this book came out before the end of the series, yes. So it doesn't conclude everything that's in there, but it certainly gives a lot of good backdrop, especially on what we're going to talk about today, which is mostly history in the Wheel of Time. But that's coming up next. Let's get more fundamental. If we're getting to the foundation, the background of this, we need to talk about this wheel.
Okay.
What's the deal with a wheel?
It's got something to do with time, right? The Wheel of Time.
It's a very apt title, isn't it? Is that the best you've got, though? Come on.
No, I can...
Tell us about the wheel.
Do a little bit better. As far as my understanding goes, there was a creator who created everything and put time and the world in a set of almost perpetual motion on this wheel that consists of a spinning circle running with 7 spokes. Technically, okay, this is one point where I get a little bit funky on this. There's 7 ages.
Yes.
The spokes would represent those ages. However, in my brain I go, shouldn't there be maybe I'm doing geometry badly. I was going to say, shouldn't there be 6 spokes to separate it into 7 pieces? But that's not how that works, is it?
No, that's not
7
how it works.
spokes
It'd be
would
7 spokes and
separate it
7
into
gaps.
7 gaps.
So the wheel turns, and that is time.
Yeah.
Okay. But in this world, time is a circular thing. That's duh. It's a wheel. There are 7 spokes. Each one represents an age. And as the wheel turns, you're passing through the 7 ages. But when you finish the 7th age, you start the first age over again. But it looks different every time.
Not exactly the same, just a general repetition. In the same way that even if we buy into a concept of time being linear, we can still see the history repeats itself. Whether it's because you're inspired by previous ideas or not, when you add the concept of a wheel, you end up getting into a cycle of, well, did the myth inspire itself? How did you get to the idea you have now if you're drawing on your previous history, which then drew on its previous history, which was you? And it's almost paradoxical, but it does work.
Now, as I understand, Jordan created this, the 7 ages in the Wheel of Time, they do repeat in the sense that there is a grand pattern to the wheel. the Third Age, which is what primarily this series takes place in, looks like the Third Age did the last time it came around in the general flow of what happens during that age. But it is not an identical carbon copy. It's not that.
No.
But so in the Wheel of Time, there is this story arc of what happens in the Third Age, and in essence, this has happened every time the Third Age came around. It may not have ended the same way every time, but the general pattern of what takes place repeats.
I really like to think of it in terms where the details of who and how and what the world itself actually looked like isn't necessarily the same. It doesn't necessarily repeat. But where you are in the stage between the conflict, the disorder that exists, does. So the whole epic quest, if you will, that goes on throughout the series, that's something that repeats. But the semi-feudal, partially advanced system that we sit in doesn't always match up with that.
I'm not sure that I'd agree with that.
I'm not sure a lot of people would, period.
Because I'd say in general, my understanding of the wheel is going to be that the Third Age is going to have this general feel every time it comes around. Just like the Second Age is going to have its general feel the same every time.
I think where I disagree is that I don't think it's necessary to have the exact same technological backdrop or feel to get a essence of time feel.
But it could.
It could. Especially if you're saying the wheel turns forever, it's an infinite. Some of the times, sure.
Now, you said at the beginning, and I completely agree with this, that the creator made the Wheel of Time, set this whole up, this grand pattern that's being, played out again and again and again. And it's on continuous play. It just keeps turning, age after age after age. So one of the fundamentals to the Wheel of Time is that everything that's here has always been here and will be again. So like reincarnation is real in the Wheel of Time. Nothing goes away forever. Everybody dies, but they'll be back.
And at least where we see it, this is a very well-known fact. It's not a religion, it's not a belief. It's treated that way to an extent. There are zealots, but it is something that is known and widely accepted.
Yeah. And you said religion. There's really not religion in this series. There are people who have very strong beliefs about things, but nobody seems to go around worshiping the creator. They may understand there's a creator, but there's no church. A lot of fantasy series do have a church, and it plays a big role. This does not have a church.
They seem to, especially in the early stages, like in the first book, there are a couple thrown references to kind of an underlying church system, whether you want to make a claim that, say, the White Cloaks are a militant church organization.
I wouldn't go with that.
But if you believe that the creator, the light, is the religion, that's what they are. But the other side of things, in one of the earliest chapters, there's a little saying or something about the Dark One is locked away in Sheol Gul with the Forsaken, and it's basically a nighttime prayer. And it is something that seems very tradition ritual, which does give a slight aspect of, yes, this is historical, this is fact, but it's also treated a little bit, at least in, say, Podunk Farmtown, as religion.
See, I disagree, because I'll tie to what you said earlier, that it's just fact. Religion is faith in things you can't be sure about. They all know there's a creator, and they all know there's a Dark One. And that's where I want to really go to here. So you said that there's a mantra they repeat, and it's true, because one of the driving forces in the series is that people do fear the Dark One, and they know the Dark One can have a real impact on their lives. They don't really pray to the creator to save us. I mean, that thing doesn't happen. And this takes us back to, again, giving some context to where this series comes from. We've got everything that's in this Wheel of Time and the grand pattern of things. We're going to talk more about that. But we understand there are three things outside of the wheel: the creator, the Dark One, and the true source. The true source we haven't talked about at all yet, so I do want to touch on that. The true source is what powers the Wheel of Time. So the creator, made this source. This is the power that actually generates the turning of the wheel. And it plays a big role in the series because there are people who can tap into that source. It's the one thing from, in essence, from outside of the wheel, from outside the pattern, that they can draw from. And it's separated into two halves. Do you remember the names of the two halves?
Sidene and Sidar.
Or Sadine and Sadar.
It's an AI.
Pronunciations. So, Sidene, the male half. Sidar, the female half. Designed that way by the creator. And the true source is these two balanced halves of power. And it's the cooperation and the tension between those two halves that generates the energy that turns the wheel of time. And then, we do have people inside the world who can tap into it, something called channeling, where they can reach either to the male half, if they're men, or the female half, if they're women, and do things. And this is the closest thing we would get to magic in this world.
And truthfully, it is magic. It's not a...
Well, they're not doing any special spells or anything. It's kind of science magic, because they follow specific rules.
So would something that is spell-based.
I kind of go science magic on it, because the true source, and what they're tapping into, they call it the one power then, is a fundamental element of creation. Okay? And they are using it per the rules of it. And we'll talk more about those rules, but I don't think so in this episode. But they channel it, and they learn to do this in very certain ways. And they can only do this if they actually have the genetic ability. So you can't just wake up and go, I want to be a magician, I'm going to learn these spells and go do it. No. If you are born with the ability to do this, then you can learn to do it, just like you go to school and learn chemistry. You can learn to do it and then use it. So it's not truly magic in that sense.
Well, on the one side, there's the argument to be made that there's no such thing as magic, only science that people don't understand well enough, and so it seems like magic.
See, and I'd go with that for this.
On the other side of things, I look at what is seen as a descriptor of what is being done, and how do characters seem to innovate and try new things with this, and it doesn't seem quite like a scientific, logical approach, but almost more like an art form. Like they're painting a picture with these weaves they're seeing, and the more talented artist, you can do more things, create something that's never been seen before. But it's not strictly a science. If it was a science, I'd almost say you could force a way to channel even if you're not genetically
That takes
capable.
me back to it being science, though. Because one of the laws of science is that if something is provable, it's also can be replicated. So if somebody stumbles onto a new discovery of how to use the power, and they can teach someone else, and it works as well. As long as they have the ability, they can do the same exact thing.
So I don't like raining on your parade, but I'm going to rain on your parade a little bit. Yes, things need to be able to be tested and repeated. However, science is also never proven, because one of the other facts is that it has to be falsifiable.
It's proven based upon your current understanding.
Proven until it is falsified.
Yes, and that would be true of the one power, too. Because there's things, when the series first starts, that they believe about how the power works and what they can do that is proven wrong later. Such as a certain thing that could never be healed.
Apparently can.
We're not going to spoil this one yet, but yep, they know it can be healed. Look at that. Okay. So, this power is a fundamental part of the creation, the Wheel of Time, and will have a massive thing to do with this story. But it also has, it's very relevant to the background that we're talking about today. Because as I said, the majority of this story takes place in the Third Age. But the prelude that Eye of the World starts with is in the Second Age. Okay? It's at the end of the Second Age. But I don't want to start there. I want to go all the way back to the First Age.
That's probably a long time ago.
We don't know how long ago it was. There are no rules as to how long it takes the wheel to turn. There's no set parameter of how many years an age will last. We can't even say that the wheel turns at a set speed. It can speed up, it can slow down. We know nothing about that, and we have no control of that. We do know that a complete turning of the wheel takes so long that nobody even remembers the first age when you're in the seventh age. It's, as the book notes, well, I wrote something about that in my notes here. This appears in chapter 1 of The Eye of the World. It starts out with this. The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the third age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose in the mountains of mist. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning.
So that is by far one of the best paragraphs, I think, throughout the entire series, partially because it's in every book.
You'll see it again, slightly different each time, but...
However, while I love it, my first thought when I first read it was, isn't this just stolen from Tolkien? Because he says basically the same thing.
Now, let's not say stolen. Let's touch on a masterful thing Robert Jordan does. He borrows from all over the place. He borrows from other literature and authors. He borrows from history very richly. And he takes it all and weaves it into something new in his series.
And I'll even go to an extent, jumping back to the fact that I'm still fighting for there being religion in this book.
Which you'll lose, but go on.
He steals borrows from a lot of religions throughout our world as well to inspire some of his systems or concepts of how his world works, especially those in like Eastern Asia.
Sure. All right, so as what I read a moment ago said, this is the third age where this story is starting. By the time the series ends, they'll be entering the fourth age. But what's the third age generally like?
Kind of a mixture of chaos and order set in a loosely medieval society with a little more civilization than was believed. Is that fair? Much of the world lives in a more countryside whatever, while there are prominent cities in various locales that almost become city-states.
Their level of technology would compare to what in our history? You said medieval. We're not talking Dark Ages.
No, it's more...
Give me a century. Where would you stick it?
Okay, this is going to be very strange that I'm saying this, because I can't actually do that. I can give you 2 centuries because it's part of 2. It's basically the Industrial Revolution if we didn't have, say, electricity or gunpowder yet.
Interesting. There are some innovations that take place during this series that would tie into Industrial Revolution type thing. Sure. But when it kind of starts out, it's that kind of really hasn't gotten going yet.
And yet,
we're on the cusp.
How the actual cities get portrayed and the political customs that are going on are more advanced than where historically we would have been at if we hadn't hit those innovations yet.
Okay. Well, that's third age. We're not going to talk much more about third age today. I want to jump back now.
Okay, back to the second, but the first.
Back to the first age. Okay, it's implied in a number of places throughout the series that the first age was actually one similar to our current age, to where we are now, but better, perhaps even, or maybe very much like ours.
To an extent, even if it is exactly ours, just by what we've said, it's not going to be remembered quite correctly, and so it will probably be remembered as better.
Maybe. But it's understood that there was technology, there was big cities, there was an advanced lifestyle that had been achieved by the end of the first age, and then something happens so that it ends. Now, we don't have any context or information in the Wheel of Time series to say why the first age ended.
Can I throw a weird theory?
Sure.
I think mankind discovers the power. And what we're going to go through with what the second age looked like is going to tie into that.
There's a sense or suggestion, though, that the arc of an age, that there has to be an event, basically, that ends it, that is not necessarily all good. Some great trauma or cataclysm of some sort.
Absolutely. And I'll do you one better. When we started going into suddenly a new age of technological advancement, space race, all that, it's coming off of a world war and the development of a nuclear bomb. Yeah, that's something that is going to go to something great, but it's also tragic and awful.
Let me tap onto that. One of the issues we have right now, because of the technology we've invented, is we're destroying the world.
Yeah.
We're poisoning our oceans, we're using, like I said, nuclear power, which leaves radioactive isotopes that won't go away, that have half-lives of a million years or whatever. We have some major issues with the environment. We're using up natural resources. If we go with, okay, and it's reaching a breaking point, and then they discover the one power, that could be the transformative thing that changes everything. I like that, actually. That's interesting. I don't know if we can ever have any proof of that. People who are listening, if you like that idea, tell us. If you have evidence from what you've read and stuff on the series that shoots that down, tell us that too. We want to know, but I'm liking this idea because what we do know about the Second Age, and we know a lot about the Second Age, is that it was awesome because they did have the one power. And they also had technology, science and technology. And the two complemented each other very well. And they continue to make great technological advances through the use of the one power to create things that then could improve everyone's lives, but not necessarily need the one power constantly.
And as that shows, it suggests to me that we had the technology, we got the one power, and we started learning how to better integrate it as time went on.
I like to make connections. We're going to try to make connections to other series and genres and stuff. And the Second Age has a relevance to Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Okay.
In that they don't have, in general, the kinds of problems that we deal with in the current world because all the needs are met. There's no financial issues. There's no scarcity of resources. I mean, Star Trek, they got replicators, make any food you want, Now that's really in, again, the Next Generation and specific to the Federation, because there are problems in other places around there. So it's not a perfect analogy, but I did think of that. In the Second Age, there are very few true problems because they've, especially as we know the most about it at the tail end of the Second Age, they've eliminated all the things that cause problems.
So this is where I need to have a little bit of a question because I don't know as much about the Second Age as you, or probably I should. Do we have accounts about the Second Age from like a variety of people, or are these all basically from the channeling type, those that would be privileged? Because if I wanted to remember a good time, I would remember it from the side of the people who were benefited.
I'm not sure I can give you a good answer on that, but we have some documents from that age. Not much survived, the changeover from the Second Age to the Third Age, and we'll get to that. But there are some documents that did survive.
Okay.
And they say what things were like back then. So that's not just the people with power, talking.
And where I have a slight concerned question of just imagining that it's all great is, technically, didn't they still kind of have like a slavery system? It was willing.
No,
but kind of.
No, totally not. So to explain that, let me get to the foundation of the second age. And I'm going to say, don't go down this rabbit trail you're on now, okay? Second Age, great time, okay? It wasn't that everything was perfect, but they really had figured out how to solve most of the problems that exist, mostly by removing the things that cause it. People do crime right now, usually because they don't have what they need. And it puts them into situations where now they want what others have. Greed and all that. If you get rid of all the issues, people, in theory, wouldn't have such motivations. So yes, there were still people during the Second Age who had mental disorders, but they were able to help those people and truly, do things to resolve issues.
And we know about that partially, if I remember correctly, because one of the Forsaken more or less worked with those individuals.
Well, and that's one of our sources for information about the Second Age. There are characters in this series, slight spoiler here, known as the Forsaken. They lived in the Second Age, and now they're back around during the Third Age. Won't go into more details there yet, but they have literal memories of what the Second Age was like, and they reference it at times. So, in the Second Age, the basic structure of society is that everybody has what they need. We don't have to work for money. Money is around still, but it's not a driving force. Instead, what is a driving force for people is service. Serving the greater good. And if you want more honor and acclaim, it's because you make a bigger difference than anyone else. That's what's lifted up and honored.
It feels very Roman. Sure, money was important or whatever, but as you progressed through the Cursus Honorum, it was all based on how much honor and respect you had from the people around you, and you would spend all of your money to get more of that.
Well, in the Second Age, they really were, driven by wanting to, be the best contributors to the greater good that they could possibly be. And then the more you contributed to your fellow man, the better acclaim you had, the more people lifted you up and appreciated you. And this was everybody. This wasn't just those who could channel. For the record, back in the Second Age and still in the Third Age, it's a very small proportion of society that can channel. It was like 2 to 3% of all people had the ability to channel.
Yeah, it's kind of like milk, 2%.
There you go. Those people had an extra ability to contribute because they could channel. They could do these things that were above and beyond what anyone else could do. Thus, they tended to be held in even higher esteem than anyone else. Not because they were more powerful, but because they were able to serve so much more.
And yet, as you say, not because they're more powerful, by technicality, those who were more powerful could theoretically serve more and would have more power. That's not necessarily saying that power was everything. It mattered how you used that power.
Yeah. But the whole ethos of society at this time was, what you do, if you can, is you make things better for everyone else. That's what you do. That's what the driving force in the culture was. We know that there was politics, there was still government and rulers, but those who could channel were not the ones ruling. They were part of government. They had influence, but they weren't always the ones in charge. Regular people had positions of authority and were making the world better as well, not just channelers. But yes, so if they can channel, they have power that allows them to make even greater contributions than anyone else. And so they worked very hard to figure out, how do we make a difference? How do we contribute and better society? What they found is men could do some amazing things with the one power. And women could do some amazing things too, but they were often different amazing things. Because there are 5 different elements to the one power, and this is a whole nother podcast episode to talk about that. But men tended to be stronger in some of them and women stronger in others of them, so they weren't identical. Why that's most relevant is that means a woman might want to do certain things to really contribute to society, and she can't because she's not strong in that area. That's something more that men were strong in. And vice versa. But what they found is they tried to develop how we can do things with the one power is that when they worked together and combined those different strengths, they could do far more. Their biggest and greatest accomplishments were always done when they did it together.
Now, as you said, the power is something we'll get into more later, but I would like to just quickly acknowledge that while it works for the story and helps build a foundation of why they had to work together, we do tend to see time and time again people who are exceptions to the idea that men and women should be more powerful in differing areas. And throughout the series, we find examples of people who are powerful in ways that they supposedly shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, again, these are the way they usually work. But even in the Second Age, which I'm going to use the term that they have for it in the Third Age, they refer to it as the Age of Legends. There were exceptions back then too. So there were some people who were powerful in men who were powerful in what traditionally is more of a woman's strength area with the power. I mean, those things happened. And yes, we certainly see that in these books too. But we've got these people working together. Should we name them? We haven't used their name yet. All right, these are Aes Sedai. Is that how you say it? That's how I say it. Okay. Because you look at it and it doesn't sound like it looks. A-E-S, and then S-E-D-A-I. So Aes Sedai. So I and die have the same sound but different vowels. What?
And if people disagree, I'm okay with that.
Yes, we'd love to hear what
we agree on this one. So that's what we're going to use on this podcast.
Anyways, so the Aes Sedai, throughout the Age of Legends, had been going better and better at doing amazing things using the One Power. But they had reached a point where they were actually a little frustrated with its restrictions, with its limitations. Some of them had ideas of, if only we didn't have to work within these rules, if there was a way that we could do even more power, and in particular, if we could not have to cooperate. Why can't a woman do this amazing work just on her own? Why does she have to rely on a man to be able to pool their powers? Is there not some way that some other power source we could tap into so we could go beyond our current limitations?
I'd like to use this as a perfect example of the fact that the Age of Legends was not without its own problems, especially the interpersonal. They did everything they could to get rid of things like greed by just having excess. But when you've left a society of currency and traded that currency for a system of honor through service, then being able to do more service is something that you would naturally want, and you end up getting greedy about that.
You could say that.
This pursuit seems noble, but it's truthfully, in many ways, not. It's a personal project to gain your own honor and help people along the way, or vice versa. And both those things are considered good enough that it doesn't really raise eyebrows.
So this does get them into trouble, pursuing this source. So you've got all these people, all these Aes Sedai, very highly esteemed in society, working constantly to do more and better with the One Power, and doing some amazing things, but some of them having a vision, a dream that, what if we could do more? How about we find a way to do more? So they're trying to research. And there are some Aes Sedai where their sole purpose was researching how could we do more than we do now. That's the next key important thing I want to talk about in this podcast. But before we do, I want to jump back to something that you mentioned minutes ago that we totally have leaped over, and that was slavery.
Right.
So tell me where you think there's slavery in the Second Age.
So it seems like a voluntary chosen slavery, but the whole idea of the Aiel and what they originally were sounds more or less like willing slaves.
Okay, so there's a group in the Second Age called the Daishan Aiel. And their whole purpose is to serve the Aes Sedai. Okay? They go about helping the Aes Sedai any way they can. These are people who don't channel. They don't have the One Power. They are basically servants for the Aes Sedai. And they serve one Aes Sedai. They don't serve them all. So you are pledged, committed to one Aes Sedai. Now, an Aes Sedai could have more than one Daishan Aiel, but this was their commitment. Their life calling was to be a servant for this person. And they were held the second highest honor of all society, only behind the Aes Sedai, because their service helped the Aes Sedai make all these contributions. This wasn't slavery, though. It was a choice.
And yet, while it's a choice, while it's still honored, it feels very lacking in free will, which doesn't matter what the series is, that is going to grind against things that I am comfortable with.
Except, I think they could quit.
I don't think so.
I think they could. We'll have to look that up. Hey, guys, tell us, could they quit? I think they could quit. Now, they wouldn't quit.
If they did, it'd be
why
social
would they?
suicide.
It would invalidate their whole reason for being, for what they believed in, so they wouldn't want to quit. But they could quit.
Whether it was in their eyes or in the eyes of the public, quitting would be a fate worse than death.
But they choose to become Daishan Aiel. They choose it.
It's not born into?
I don't think so.
That's another thing. We need to look up and get help.
I guess we better check that.
It seems like you can choose into it, but also if you're born of Daishan Aiel, you're a Daishan Aiel.
I don't know. We'll have to do some research on that. Not 100% on that. Let's get back to the issue. So we've got some of these Aes Sedai doing research. That's what they do. And they're researching how could we do even more than we do now. And they find a place in the pattern that feels thin. And it's hard to describe this, but basically they sense that there's something they can almost see, almost sense, almost feel that appears to be another source of power.
Well,
not the power they draw from, not the true source, something else. And they're like, if we can find this, if we can tap into this, it may be the answer we've been looking for. A source of power that's not reliant on the restrictions that we have from the true source. Something would allow us to go to whole new heights and whole new levels. Very exciting.
And truthfully, it's just a situation of giving humanity something that always piques our interest, the unknown. Throw something that we know we don't know, and we will throw ourselves at it tirelessly until we think that we do.
The unknown, it's exciting. They're going to go for it. They decide, hey, this is worth exploring and figuring out if this is the answer we've been seeking.
Spoiler alert, it maybe is kind of worth it, but also really bad idea. Don't do that.
So these researchers, using the one power, bore a hole through the fabric of the pattern at this point, this weak spot, and they don't find this new source of power. What they find actually is the Dark One. That's what they were sensing. You know, this is not something that comes from the wheel that the creator, no, this is the Dark One. They didn't even know about the Dark One. Okay, that there were issues, we've already said that, there were issues with the world at the time, but they were issues that were just from, people are people, and they found ways to pretty much resolve them. But now, they bored a hole that allows the Dark One to be able to reach in. And he's bad. Okay, so this is now evil, real evil, can touch the world.
So can I ask, what is the Dark One, or is that a question for another day?
There's not much answer to what the Dark One is. It's just an opposing force to the Creator, who the Creator kept out of the wheel. When he created the wheel, it is good. It's his pattern, his grand design, and the Dark One is outside of it and does not have access to the wheel. The Dark One doesn't like the Creator. The Dark One would love to get his hands on this creation, this wheel of time, and totally subvert it to his own image, which would be a very bad place.
So I'm going to throw the second that I can think of my very hot takes tonight and say, and I'll keep coming back to this as we go through the series, I don't think the Creator and the Dark One are two different entities. I think they're two sides of the same coin, but that coin is one coin. Even so much so that they may have some separate consciousness, but I think they're the same being. There are some places that throughout the book, books will kind of go as to why I think some of this, but also just kind of running into, you said it yourself, needing to be an opposing force, but where is it from? If it's a creator type force and it wanted to subvert the wheel, why couldn't the Dark One just create its own wheel?
Oh, maybe he could have.
Why would it need to do this? And so and as you get to the very end of the series, there becomes some questioning as to whether or not the Dark One is necessary for the wheel. You said he's not in the pattern, not in the wheel, but whether or not he as an entity is necessary becomes a question. And I stand in the side of going, both he and the Creator are necessary, in the pattern, even though they exist outside of it, because they are the same entity.
Okay. Disagree right now. We'll work on that. Interesting to hear if any of our listeners have a take on that.
I am ready to get taken down.
Okay, almost to the end of what I want to talk about today. But let's just very quick. They poke this hole, this bore, through the pattern, and now the Dark One can touch them directly. Okay, it causes a big explosion, a cataclysm right there. Basically takes out the location where they had done this and starts a period of time called the Collapse, which lasts for about 100 years, where now the Dark One is influencing the hearts of men and the hearts and minds of people. Instead of occasionally someone having some issues, now there's darker temptations and envy and greed, and is ramping up in people in ways that never happened before in the Second Age. He's really poisoning the well in many ways. He can't come in right now. He's not physically here in the world in the world of the Wheel of Time, but his influences, his touch is. One of the ways that shows up pretty quickly are people who side with him, who actually become friends of the dark, which later on are then commonly called dark friends. But the friends of the dark are people who are now openly declaring for the Dark One, saying, we think this is a better way than what we've had to do all along. We don't want to do it the way, we do want to pursue our own goals, and we want our own power and money and greed, and there are forces for the light, for lack of a better term, because friends of the dark, who are trying to quell that and stop that, but they're not willing to lower themselves to the level of the friends of the dark. So it's kind of a losing battle, because the dark friends will do anything and everything to get what they want, whereas the good side has morals, has qualms about going too far on some things. And it's a very negative time, okay? Things are getting worse and worse. And it really takes a turn when some of the Aes Sedai become friends of the dark, that they actually declare for the Dark One.
And I do believe, while we say it takes a turn at that point, to an extent, that point starts immediately. It's not like 100 of these years go by and then some of the Aes Sedai turn.
They're being influenced just like everybody else. But it's after about 100 years that the first of the Aes Sedai openly declares, I'm with the dark guy. I'm with him now. You guys. Yeah, and that causes very quickly the War of Power, which is the term they use it, which lasts for about 10 years. Where now there is not just bad influences and things popping up and bad things going on, but now there's open war, where Aes Sedai, and some of these were very powerful and influential, they had been very top Aes Sedai, are now actively battling and leading forces of evil, forces of the dark, against the good side, trying to truly take everything over and destroy everything that opposes them. And this is a very bad time, very serious time. Again, now both sides have armies. Both sides are actually weaponizing things. I mean, a lot of inventions and powerful technologies they'd created for good are now being converted to weapons of force.
As usually happens.
By both sides. But as the battle goes along, the bad side is winning. There's lots of details. We're not going to go into all of them. But the bad side is winning. And it gets to a point where it's clear the good guys are going to lose. Nope, they can't beat these guys. So they have to do something drastic. And what they decide they have to do is they've got to find a way to get the Dark One to no longer be able to touch the world.
Shove him back out.
And there's two options that are put forward. One, favored by one of the lead female Aes Sedai, is that they create a barrier around Shio Ghul, which is the location where the boar is, with this place where he can reach in and touch. They create a barrier using the one power, and they create these two power sources, Sa'angreals. That's a term we'll talk about later. But these two, the biggest, most powerful Sa'angreals that had ever been created in this age. And they're going to use them, one that can tap into the male half, Saidin, one that can tap into the female half, Saidar, and together they will use that power to wall off Shao Ghul so he can no longer touch the world.
Can you say the name of that place one more time?
Shao Ghul? How would you say it?
Shao Ghul.
Shao Ghul? Shao Ghul? Might be Shao Ghul.
It's an AY.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, like how we normally would pronounce things means a lot in Wheel of Time.
Oh, yeah, totally. I've definitely looked in the glossary at some point many years ago.
Anyways, so that's what one group wants to do. The other group, led by one of the most powerful male Aes Sedai, Luz Theron Telamon.
That name returns a lot.
LTT himself. He's like, no, what we need to do is we need to go physically to Shao Ghul and in one huge stroke seal that bore. We can't just wall the area off. We need to seal it. We bore it, we need to seal it back up. And we can do this.
We need to fix it, not just quarantine.
That's right. That's right. We can put a real permanent patch on this sucker. And yeah, quarantines we know don't work, right? Anyways, so that's his plan. The male Aes Sedai, the female Aes Sedai, they're arguing about this. Which way should they go? There's fear that Luz Theron's plan is too dangerous and won't work, and then they'll lose everybody, and it'll be all done. There's nothing else they can do. So we don't want to take that chance. Plus, if you get that close to the boar, maybe you'll make it worse and free the Dark One. They don't want, don't do it. So let's do the other plan. Luz Theron and his supporters, they don't like that. They think we can do this. Come on, if we work together, we can get this done. But the female Aes Sedai won't do it. So, all right, we'll do your plan. But before they can execute that plan...
LTT says, screw it, I'm doing it myself.
No.
Because he definitely does that.
These Sa'angreals that they created are huge physical statues. Massive. But they each have a key. A little small miniature, okay? And those keys allow you to use the power of that Sa'angreal anywhere you are. Those keys fall into the hands of the dark side. Now, the Dark Ones don't know they have it. It's the place those keys were located is overrun.
Gotcha. I do have a follow-up question. Is there only one key each? Because...
one key each.
I really thought...
I know, make a spare, right?
No, throughout the series, it's mentioned you found, like, a key to it. The wording, I'm pretty sure, makes it seem like there were more.
I am only familiar with there being a key for each one. But maybe there were more. I'm not familiar with there being more than one. But they no longer have access to them. That's the problem. And they don't have... I mean, this is a really critical part of the war. They're losing. They don't have the force to take that place back. And in fact, what if the Dark Ones, the dark side, figures out they have these things now? That'd be catastrophic. These Sa'angreal are so powerful that if you control them, you literally could break the world.
Theoretically, it wasn't.
That's what they believe.
Tried.
Luz Theron says, okay, we have no choice now. We've got to go. We've got to go attack now this one last chance, gasp, attack and seal the boar. And the women say, no, there must be another way.
The issues still stood.
So Luz Theron gets his band of people together, all men, and they go anyways. Now, what did we learn about Saidar and Saidin? You're most powerful when they work together. He attacks with only the male half. Access to the male half of the true source, the one power. So, tremendous battle takes place. They actually succeed.
Kind of.
No, there's no kind of. They do succeed. They are able to seal the bore. The problem, and this is where your kinda comes from, is right at that last moment as they sealed it up, the Dark One himself strikes back. He makes a counterstroke, which is the term that's used again and again, the counterstroke. And that does something horrific and horrible that ends up breaking the world and ending the Second Age. But that's what we'll talk about next time. Because there's a whole lot to talk about that happens as a result of that counterstroke. Suffice it to say...
it's not good.
Yeah, the world is not the same after that. The women end up saying, told you so.
They did.
No, they actually don't have time to say told you so, because it goes so badly so fast. But their concerns were warranted, and it gets pretty bad. But yeah, I think that's enough to talk about for today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff. Now, the first age, we talked a little. Second age, we talked a lot. There's so much more that is revealed in the Wheel of Time series, all 15 books, about the second age, but it's never like one big information dump. It's little bits here, little bits there, little bits there, all scattered throughout. And what we've talked about is kind of an amalgamation. You put all that information together, and what do you know? As you read the series, and again, if you're doing it for the first time, now you've got some background that you would have had to work really hard over 15 books to get all of, and, well, you're welcome.
And because we're pulling this from so many different places and sources, we're bound to get things wrong here.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you're following along and find yourself screaming at us that we're absolute idiots...
You can't say that!
Please correct us. We will probably correct ourselves in the future based upon you letting us know. But if you also just feel a need to weigh in or give us a shout about any of our hot or not so hot takes, we'd love to hear from you.
And in fact, if you do, dead to rights, correct us on something we said today that was just flat out wrong, we'll give you a shout out. We'll give you credit for being the one, perhaps the first of 500 people who told us how wrong we were on something. But whoever tells us first, we'll definitely give you some credit. There are ways you can connect with us through social media that we'd love to have you use. We have a Facebook page. Just look up Fantasy for the Ages. Smush it all together, one word. 4 words, but pretend it's one word. And you'll find us. We'd love to have you friend us there. We'll let you in. It's a nice, happy place. Bunch of people already there. We're also on Twitter. Look for us as Jim Zach Scriven. Again, 3 words, treated as one word. So just smush it all together. We did throw capital letters in because it reads a little uglier if I don't capitalize the first names and the last name. But Jim Zach Scriven on Twitter. You'll find our Fantasy for the Ages page. We're on Instagram too. There are 3 photos right now. It's kind of dull. Of course, if they're listening to this, like they found us months later, there'll be a lot more. There will be 1 more, maybe 2 more after this, because we took a picture today as we started the podcast. I'll be putting that up there in a minute. And there's also a Discord channel. If you want to join us on Discord and talk more about any of these things, that's one of the easiest ways to do it. We're still setting things up on the Discord. And honestly, if you join the Discord channel, like the day you hear this, you go find us on Discord, Fantasy for the Ages. You find us, you ask in, you'll be the first one. Because no one else is there yet and nothing has happened. But there are different areas that you can talk to us there on. Eventually, we'll probably do some live recordings using Discord. That's a lot of fun. We'll see when we get to there if there's enough people who actually want to talk to us. But that's it. Social media, whatever works for you, connect with us. Let us know what you think. Give us your ideas, your feedback, your razzes. We'll take any of it. Any last words, Zach?
No.
Well, you heard it here. Zach is speechless. I tell you, it doesn't happen very often. All right. Thanks for being with us, guys. We'll talk to you next time.